"You're embarrassing me," Michael hissed through clenched teeth, and his fingers, white with tension, gripped the wine glass so tightly, as if they were going to crush the fragile glass. The crystal stem reflected the diffused lighting of one of Milan's most expensive restaurants, making prisms of light dance on our spotless white tablecloth, flickering to the rhythm of barely audible classical music pouring from somewhere invisible speakers. His mother, Rachel, sat across from us, all collected, with immaculately coiffed silver hair and red lips curved in a grin that made my stomach clench, as if in anticipation of a storm that I no longer wanted to endure. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. I took a deep breath, not because I didn't know what to say, but to find the point of balance in myself that I had to find over and over again during 15 years of a marriage filled not with passion, but with a survival strategy, a marriage in which every gesture, every word was a deliberate move on a board where I had long ago stopped to feel like a queen. I knew that this evening, this dinner, this particular moment, would be a turning point, a knot that would either break or drag on forever. I looked up at Michael and said in a flat voice, which still had a note of vulnerability, but already broke through the metal of determination. "I can't pay for this dinner, Michael. You know, I helped my sister with her medical bills. I don't have an extra $3,000 right now." It was partly true. The treatment of Beatty, my younger sister, was real, every injection, every chemotherapy course, every night in the hospital, smelling of antiseptics and fear. But the truth was also that I had learned to put it off, little by little, unnoticeably, not for lying, but for survival. I was saving up my personal fund, hidden, protected, like a nest in a cliff crevice, where my dreams, my plans, my powers could survive. I worked as an interior designer, and yes, sometimes the income was good, but far from what Michael imagined when he demanded that I pay for extravagant dinners, for designer suits, for the whims that he generously presented as a commitment of love. While swirling the wine, Rachel interjected, her voice dripping venom through her mask of politeness. "Michelle told me that you have achieved great success in your small decorating business. Of course, you can treat your mother-in-law to some special dinner." Her words, wrapped in condescension, were like needles piercing the skin with extreme precision. I silently looked around, elegant couples in evening dresses, waiters moving with the grace of ballet dancers, the soft light reflecting off the glasses. Everything in this place screamed of old money and privileges. It was Rachel's natural habitat, a carefully chosen stage where she felt like an empress, and I knew that she had calculated every element of the evening down to the smallest detail. "No," I said, and although my voice was quiet, there was a hardness in it that couldn't be ignored. The change in Michael's face was instantaneous. His carefully honed facade of sophistication cracked, and the unexpressed anger that had accumulated over the years under a layer of smug charm surfaced. In one smooth motion, he lifted a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon and, without hesitation, threw its contents in my face. The cold, thick wine slid over my skin, leaving purple marks on my creamy silk blouse, and scarlet gasps of amazement rang out from the neighboring tables. Rachel laughed, short and sharp, as if she had cut a taut string of silence in the hall with a blade. "Pay the bill," Michael demanded. "Or this marriage will end right here." I slowly reached for a napkin, wiping the wine from my face, feeling my hand remain surprisingly steady, no trembling, no hesitation, just concentration, as if I had finally entered a point of calm that I had not known for so long. 15 years of emotional manipulation, endless tension, living on the edge of words and expectations, all this has now crystallized into one thought. I could smell the wine on my skin, feel it dripping from my collar, hear the whispers of the audience around me, but instead of shame, something else rose inside me, clarity. I got up from my chair, and the sound of my feet sliding on the expensive wooden floor seemed to me like the beginning of a new chapter. "You're right about one thing, Michael," I said, picking up my purse. "That's the end of it." I took out my phone, unlocked the screen with confident movements, opened the camera and, slowly, took a picture of my face soaked in wine. What are you doing?" Michael muttered, reaching for my phone. I took a step back, keeping the camera trained on him, and my voice was stronger than I'd ever heard it before. I'm creating evidence. Would you like to throw something else at me? Or maybe explain to everyone here why you think it's okay to attack your wife when she refuses to pay for your mother's whims? Rachel's grin disappeared. Her whole face froze, and something resembling fear flashed in her eyes. You're ungrateful, she began, but a new voice interrupted her, a firm, masculine, unfamiliar one. Mrs. Barron, the restaurant manager said, appearing at our table, I'm going to have to ask you and your son to leave the establishment immediately. He turned to me with an expression of restrained respect. Would you like us to call the police? Michael jumped up with such impetuosity that his chair toppled back with a crash, attracting the attention of the surrounding customers, whose eyes were now fixed on our dramatic scene. His face contorted with anger, and, clenching his fists, he growled through his teeth, "You wouldn't dare." Without lowering my phone's camera, I continued to record what was happening, realizing that these shots could become crucial in the future. Try to stop me, I replied, trying to make my voice sound firm and confident, despite the trembling inside. What happened next changed not only my life, but also the lives of dozens of witnesses in that restaurant, and subsequently influenced the legal system and inspired many women who heard my story to find the courage to step out of the shadow of their oppressors. However, at that moment, I only knew one thing: I had finally found my voice. The cold wine was still running down my neck, leaving a sticky trail on my skin, when I dialed the number that was supposed to be the beginning of my new life. But before I made the call, I had to say something to the man who thought he could break me with a glass of wine and 15 years of control. Do you know what's funny, Michael? I began, looking him straight in the eye. I've already paid for this dinner. I'm paying for everything, for 15 years of humiliation, for the loss of my own self, for your control. But I won't do it anymore. I paused, letting my words sink into his mind. Check our joint account tomorrow morning. I think you'll be interested to see what happened there. His expression changed. The realization flashed in my eyes that I wasn't just talking about a divorce, I was getting my life back. The policeman who answered the call was named Alonzo DeSantis. He had kind eyes that did not match the stern expression on his face. We sat in a quiet corner of the station while he carefully studied my application. The wine on my blouse has dried, leaving a dull burgundy stain reminiscent of the events of the previous evening. Mrs. Barron, he began, but I interrupted him. Agatha. Just Agatha Rousseau. I'm going back to my maiden name. He nodded, making a note in his notebook. Agatha, you mentioned that this is not the first incident of its kind. My hands gripped the paper cup of cold coffee that was offered to me. Through the station's window, I watched the dawn break over Milan, turning the sky pink and gold. I didn't sleep all night, but I felt more awake than I had in recent years. I said that pouring wine was something new. Michael has always preferred less visible methods of influence, financial control, emotional manipulation, isolation. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. Did you know that I haven't seen my best friend Alma in 3 years? He convinced me that she was jealous of our marriage and was trying to ruin it. And I believed him. I took a sip of my coffee, wincing at its bitterness. But the real masterpiece was the way he managed finances. Every time my design business turned a profit, he found ways to empty my accounts, urgent investments, family obligations, instilling guilt for allegedly not contributing enough to our common future. Meanwhile, his mother organized expensive dinners and vacations that I had to finance, while they both reminded me how lucky I was to be a part of their world. Officer DeSantis continued to take notes, his pen sliding steadily over the paper. And last night you mentioned something about a joint account? What is it? He asked, looking up at me. A small smile crossed my face. Oh yeah, that was my insurance policy. You see, 2 years ago I started documenting everything, every transaction, every manipulation, every incident. I opened a separate account and started transferring small amounts of money, nothing that could arouse suspicion, just enough to create a safety cushion. I also kept records of how Michael used our joint account for personal expenses, while claiming business deductions. The IRS would be very interested in these records. Is that why you recorded at the restaurant? The officer specified. Partly. But mostly because I knew what would happen when Michael checked the joint account this morning. Last night, while he was busy trying to intimidate me in the restaurant, my lawyer was processing the documents that I had prepared a few months ago, every questionable transaction, every tax discrepancy, every piece of evidence. All this was transferred to the appropriate authorities. Officer DeSantis leaned back in his chair, carefully studying me. His gaze was perceptive and impenetrable at the same time. You've been planning this for a long time, he remarked, raising an eyebrow slightly. I put the cup of cold coffee on the table, feeling my fingers tremble. 2 years, 3 months, and 12 days, I replied, my voice steady, but a hurricane of emotions was raging inside. That's how long it took me to realize that the shame I was feeling was not mine. He belonged to them. My phone vibrated on the table, flashing another message from Michael. From the moment I left the restaurant, dozens of them have accumulated, from threats to pleas and desperate attempts to negotiate. I turned the screen to the officer, showing the last of them. Baby, please, we can solve this. I'll call for help. Don't destroy everything we've built. I smiled bitterly, feeling a wave of bitterness rise inside. Everything we've built? It was a prison, just with very expensive walls, I repeated, barely able to contain my sarcasm. At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and a young officer with a serious expression entered the office. Miss Russo, we have visitors who would like to talk to you. One of them is Rachel Barron, a lawyer. Another. He hesitated. She claims to be your sister, in law, Katerina Barron, Michael's sister. My heart skipped a beat. Katerina, or Kate, as she preferred, was Michael's younger sister, the black sheep of the Barron family. 5 years ago, she was deprived of financial support after she refused to participate in what she called a toxic dynasty. We haven't spoken since. Michael skillfully severed those ties, too. Is Kate here? My voice cracked, betraying surprise and hope. Officer DeSantis looked at me carefully. Do you want to talk to them? I stood up, smoothing my wine-stained blouse, symbolizing the stains of the past that I sought to wash away. Yes, but first there is something you should know about the family business of the Barrons. Kate and I are probably the only ones brave or reckless enough to reveal this. The officer raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to continue. What's the matter? I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. The real reason Rachel organized dinner last night. She recently discovered what I had known for months. Her perfect son, my controlling husband, was embezzling funds from the family fund. And I have proof of every transaction. When I followed Officer DeSantis into the meeting room, my heart was pounding in my chest. I didn't know if I would find an ally in Kate or if this was just another trap of the Barron family. The next few minutes could determine not only my future, but also the fate of many entangled in the web of manipulation and deception woven by this family. I squared my shoulders and took a deep breath. Whatever was waiting for me behind that door, I was ready to face it. I've already been through the worst, or at least that's what I thought. But what Kate was about to tell me changed everything I knew about the last 15 years of my life. Kate looked the same as I remembered her, disheveled curly hair, no makeup, and an unruly sparkle in her eyes that the Barron family could not extinguish. She was sitting alone in the interrogation room. Rachel's lawyer was not in sight. When our eyes met, she stood up and did something I hadn't expected. She hugged me. I saw the video, she whispered in my ear. Someone in the restaurant posted it online. You're a great, brave woman. I pulled away, feeling embarrassed and relieved at the same time. Has the lawyer left? I asked, looking around. Kate nodded. I told him I needed to be alone with you. He's probably already calling Rachel, warning her that the black sheep has returned. Her smile was sharp but warm. "We don't have much time," she continued, pulling a battered leather notebook out of her bag. "Do you remember how I was separated from my family? Everyone thought it was because of my refusal to participate in the family business, to become another puppet in the show of barons. That's true, but not all of it." I frowned, trying to figure out what she was getting at. "What are you talking about?" Kate took a deep breath, her eyes filled with determination. "I've discovered something." She opened her notebook, revealing pages of handwritten notes and what looked like financial notes. "I found this 5 years ago," Kate said, her voice almost a whisper, but every word was laced with tension. "What made Rachel ruin my reputation, and Michael?" "Well," Michael chose her side. "This concerned your design business, Agatha, and several other small businesses run by the wives or husbands of members of the Barron family over the past 20 years. My throat is dry. What's wrong with them?" I asked, even though an uneasy feeling was already forming inside me. Kate looked me straight in the eye. "They should never have succeeded," she said, and her voice became especially firm. "In fact, their failure was the goal." Kate's words hit me like an icy shower. Everything that seemed like a failure suddenly took on an ominous structure. "Rachel and Michael, they've been running this scheme for years," Kate continued without looking away. "They find strong, successful, independent women, lure them into a family through marriage, and then step by step deprive them of control, first over business, then over money, and eventually over their own lives. They use their family reputation and powerful connections to convince these women that it's okay to share, trust, and compromise. And then the manipulation begins." I couldn't breathe. I kept seeing endless bills for family needs, parties, trips, all these expenses that I considered to be a manifestation of generosity or part of a life together. The constant costs, the expensive dinners, the obligatory donations, the guilt of not supporting my family enough. Now it looked like a carefully constructed pressure mechanism. Kate continued, "They keep pushing until the business collapses, or the woman empties her accounts, trying to keep afloat what was already doomed. And when she becomes financially dependent, they have full control in their hands." I remembered all the wives of the barons I had come across over the years, kindred spirits with whom we had never formed friendships, because Michael always kept us apart. And now I realized it wasn't an accident. It was a system. I asked the question, the answer to which was already guessed in the depths of my soul: why? Kate sighed, and her voice became even quieter. "Control, power, and money laundering. The Barron Family Foundation is not only an instrument of embezzlement. They use bankrupt businesses to launder money received from other, less legal sources. Every bankruptcy is a part of their accounting. Everything looks legitimate. The perfect disguise." I felt dizzy. I remembered Rachel insisting that all bills be paid through my business account. It made sense now. "But you did something they didn't expect," Kate said proudly. "You've been taking notes. You've built your financial cushion. You survived. And now they're scared. Rachel found out that you're working with the accountant who used to run the Barron family's business, Jacob Gaddy. They tried to find and destroy all copies of your records." Jacob. The name hit me like an electric shock. He contacted me 6 months ago, concerned about the oddities in the flow of funds between my personal and business accounts. It was he who helped me build the picture, collect the evidence. I wanted to say something, but at that moment there was a knock on the door, and Officer DeSantis entered the room, his face serious. "Agatha," he said, "we just got a call from the hospital. Your sister Beatty's nurse reported the incident." My heart skipped a beat. What happened? Someone tried to enter her room. Introduced himself as a family member. When he was rejected, he became aggressive. I had to call security. He paused, looking at us. "We can't confirm his identity, but—" "Michael," Kate and I said in unison, an alarm flashed in her eyes. "We have to go there immediately," she said, getting up, but before that, there's something else you need to know. Leah is not just your sister. She's a witness. 3 years ago, before the diagnosis, she worked as an accountant in one of the subsidiaries of the Barons. I froze, slowly realizing the meaning of her words. Everything was going well: Beatty's sudden illness, her departure from the company, and Michelle's intervention in her treatment. I whispered, they've been watching her all this time, using her illness to control me. Kate squeezed my hand. We're going to finish this, Agatha. But first, Beatty. At the moment when Kate and I rushed out of the police station building, my mobile phone suddenly vibrated, notifying me of an incoming message from an unknown number. Pausing for a moment, I unlocked the screen and saw a short text consisting of only 4 words. You should have paid. These laconic but ominous words made my blood run cold, and I felt my heart skip a beat, realizing the gravity of the situation and the possible consequences. Without wasting time thinking, Kate and I continued on our way to the hospital, where my sister Leah, known in the family as Beatty, was staying. Officer DeSantis followed us, his face expressing concentration and tension, reflecting the gravity of the moment. The hospital corridors seemed endless. Their sterile whiteness and harsh fluorescent lights created a sense of unreality, reinforcing the anxiety that squeezed my heart with every passing second. My blouse, stained with wine stains from earlier, attracted curious stares from the staff, but I barely noticed it, completely focused on the thought of Leah's safety. Leah has always been a model of resilience and inner strength for me. Even during grueling courses of chemotherapy, she maintained her dignity and found the strength to joke, encouraging me and others. Now, realizing that her illness could not have been an accident, but part of the Baron family's insidious plan, I felt a storm of emotions growing inside me, from anger to despair. As we turned the corner leading to Leah's room, we saw 2 guards standing at the door, their tense faces and the mess in the hallway. An overturned cart, scattered medical supplies, spoke of a recent incident. But what worried me the most was Leah's voice coming from the ward, full of determination and anger. I told you to get out. Without hesitating for a second, I opened the door and froze on the threshold from the scene I saw. Leah was sitting on the bed, her thin face expressing determination and fatigue. The headscarf covering her head was slightly askew. Rachel Barron stood at the foot of the bed, her impeccable appearance and expensive clothes contrasting with the surroundings of the hospital room, emphasizing her arrogance and disregard for others. Next to her was Jacob Gaddy, a man I trusted and who helped me gather evidence against the Barron family. His presence here, next to Rachel, was a blow to me that destroyed the remnants of trust. Rachel turned to me, her face lit up with a fake smile. There was sweet falsehood in her voice. Agatha, how nice that you joined us. Your sister and I were reminiscing about the past, discussing issues of loyalty and family secrets. Leah's eyes met mine, and in that look I read the depth of her feelings and sufferings. Leah spoke, her voice low but firm. They were trying to buy my silence. The first time it happened was 3 years ago, shortly before I was diagnosed. I went up to my sister and took her cold hand in mine, trying to give her warmth and support. Jacob took a step forward, his voice uncertain. Miss Russo, perhaps we should discuss this in private. There was a misunderstanding about some documents. I looked at him with disbelief and pain. Do you mean the very documents that you helped me collect? Tell me, Jacob, was it Rachel's idea to get close to me, pretend that you were helping, but actually pass information on to the family? Kate, who was standing at the door with Officer DeSantis, laughed a short, joyless laugh. Jacob, is it really that difficult? You helped the family identify threats and then neutralize them. How many other women have you helped so much? Jacob tried to keep his composure, but his voice faltered. Katerina, you're still playing detective, I see. Did you tell Agatha why you actually started investigating the family? About your own failed business projects? Kate stepped forward, her eyes glittering with anger. You mean the business that you and Michael sabotaged? The one you destroyed because I refused to play by your rules? Yes, Rachel, I told Agatha everything. Leah squeezed my hand, her voice was barely audible. Agatha, in the bedside table, the notebook. I reached out to the bedside table that Leah had indicated, and opening the drawer, I found a worn, battered leather magazine inside, which looked surprisingly familiar. The cover, the shape of the pages, the faint fingerprints on the edges. It resembled the one in which Kate kept her notes, but it was older, more dilapidated, with a special noble touch of time, which only happens to things whose value is determined not by the material, but by the content. I felt the thread of memory stretching in my memory, linking the past and the present into one tight, disturbing tangle. Rachel took a sharp step forward, as if wanting to snatch the magazine out of my hands before I could open it, but Officer DeSantis, acting with the practiced reflexes of a professional, moved silently between us, blocking the way with cold-blooded determination, leaving Rachel no chance to approach. 3 years ago, Leah began, her voice strong and clear as a bell in the morning mist, gaining strength, penetrating every crevice of the sterile hospital room. I discovered inconsistencies in accounting, not only in the company where I worked, but also similar schemes in many enterprises owned by the Baron. I started taking notes. She nodded at the magazine, and I felt my fingers tighten on the cover. I recorded everything, at first just as an observation. And then I started getting sick. At first, there were trifles, dizziness, weakness, fatigue, which did not go away. When I was finally diagnosed, I already knew it wasn't an accident. She looked at Monty, who was standing against the wall, and her voice became sharper. Do you think I'm being dramatic? That my doctor's voice was dangerous? I'm not suggesting anything. She stared straight ahead, unblinking. I'm just stating the facts. I have saved all the copies. The original notes were given to my lawyer, in an envelope with instructions to open it only in case of my death or disappearance. Do you really think that I won't be able to protect myself? And your sister? Jacob suddenly rushed to the door, but Officer DeSantis was already expecting this and smoothly stood in his way, blocking the exit. And at that moment, as if everything went into slow motion, Rachel abruptly reached into her immaculate designer handbag. Kate, as if anticipating her movement, shouted, "Careful!" I instinctively rushed to Beatty's bed, covering her with my body, expecting a shot or something equally scary, but instead of a weapon, Rachel took out her smartphone and with cold determination uttered words into it that sent an icy chill down my spine. It's time for Plan B. At the same moment, the lights in the room crackled, blinked, and, as if obeying an invisible command, went out completely. Darkness fell over us suddenly, like a thick, suffocating blanket, broken only by Leah's panicked intake of breath and Kate's quiet curse. I heard the distant sound of running feet in the hallway. After a few agonizing seconds, the emergency lighting came on, casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. Rachel and Jacob were gone. But they left behind a mark as fragile and terrifying as anything they tried to hide. On the table by Leah's bed was her medical record. I immediately noticed that a new page had been added to it, printed on fresher paper than the others. I took it with trembling fingers, feeling the unbidden truth already breathing down my neck. What I read changed everything we thought we knew about Leah's illness, how deep the Baron family's reach was, and to what lengths they were willing to go to keep their secrets. The emergency lighting cast an uneven light on the document as I slowly turned page after page, and with each new paragraph, my body was frozen with horror. Standing next to me was Dr. Emily Gaddy. Fortunately, has no family connection with Jacob, and her face was becoming more and more gloomy. We've been reviewing these treatment protocols, she said, her voice ringing with alarm, and I can say with certainty that they don't meet the standards of lymphoma therapy. Moreover, she scrolled further, some of these drugs should not have been prescribed at the same time at all. Their interaction doesn't just weaken the body, she paused, looking at Leah with horror, it mimics and exacerbates the symptoms of cancer. Leah, with gloomy clarity, finished for her, by making me weaker and weaker, they made it look like a natural progression of the disease. Michael insisted that my prescriptions be prescribed by their family doctor. He insisted that everything was covered by their insurance. I started to suspect something was wrong when it only got worse after each new medication, but then I was already too weak to fight. Kate, holding in her hands the new page Rachel had left, frowned more and more. Take a look. This is a disclaimer. With Beatty's fake signature, dated 3 years ago. They created a paper trail retroactively to cover themselves if anyone starts asking questions. Officer DeSantis photographed page after page, talking quietly into her walkie-talkie. A couple of minutes later, 2 more officers entered the room, and while they were interviewing the guards, the medical officer standing behind suddenly spoke. Your original attending physician, Dr. Gaddy, are you sure that he started guiding you before the intervention of the Barons? Do you remember their name? What is it? The officer asked, and all eyes turned to Leah, whose face, tired and pale, lit up with a painful memory when she closed her eyes and stammered, as if the name itself had escaped from the depths of her consciousness. Neri. Andrena Neri. She seemed worried when I told her that I was being transferred to another doctor. She tried to say something, as if she wanted to warn, but then Michael was in the room. She looked at me, her eyes filled with despair, silent pleading, but she still didn't dare to say a word. It was right after you. How did you marry him, Agatha? I didn't want to cause you any trouble. My throat tightened with a sudden wave of guilt and rage as I listened to my sister, whose words unraveled a complex web of misconceptions I had been in all these years. While I, confident in my husband's generosity, gratefully accepted his financial help for the treatment of Leah, my own sister, the only soul connected to me stronger than blood, was slowly dying at the hands of the one whom I considered my support. Michael, with his outward concern, his unrelenting insistence on participating in every aspect of the treatment, his benevolent decision to pay for everything through family insurance, all this, as it now became clear, was by no means a manifestation of love or responsibility, but a sophisticated, cold part of their plan. As well as the fact that he increasingly alienated us from friends and family, cut us off from the world, making us vulnerable, isolated, and blind. We need to find this doctor, Kate spoke sharply, but with firm confidence. If Andrena Neri has saved at least something, any notes made before Dr. Baranov joined the treatment, it can prove that Beaky's condition was different from the very beginning. We already have officers working, DeSantis replied, without looking up from her phone. Surveillance cameras recorded Rachel and Jacob leaving the hospital grounds in a black SUV and heading east. We think they're going to the lake house. The house by the lake, I suddenly said out loud, and at the same moment everyone turned to me. In Lombardy. The Baron family has a house there, secluded, with its own pier and a forest around. Michael mentioned him once when he had too much wine. He said that his father taught, every self-respecting family should have a vault. A place where you can hide everything that shouldn't see the light. Leah wanted to say something, but suddenly she was shaken by a violent coughing fit. Dr. Gaddy rushed to her, checking her pulse, oxygen level, blood pressure, while I, completely helpless, held my sister's hand, as if I could give her at least a drop of my strength. The indicators are on the verge, Gaddy said sternly. We must immediately start with a new course of treatment. I order an urgent blood test and call an oncologist. Don't worry, I have everything, Leah interrupted the phrases with heavy breathing, copies, in total, not just financial statements, but also original conclusions. What kind of copies? Kate immediately leaned forward, but Leah, clinging to my hand, whispered. In the painting. Kate leaned closer. That one, which I gave to Becca, for the wedding, lighthouse. I was instantly transported back 15 years, to that warm, hopeful day of my wedding with Michael. Leah then presented us with a painting she had painted of a lighthouse at dawn, a symbol of perseverance and light. Michael hated it, called it amateurish, and laughed at the uneven strokes, but I insisted that it hang in my home office. She was a reminder to me of Leah's creative freedom, of her light. I said it out loud. It's still hanging in my office. But Michael is probably already at home. Then we need to get there first. Kate looked straight into his eyes, her voice sounding like a sentence. If these copies are there, if they are hidden in the painting, then this may be all we need. Proofs, medical fraud, financial crimes, everything. Leah squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Be careful, in this painting, she whispered with difficulty, hidden, something else, something about. I'm nobody. She didn't say, about that day, when their father died. My phone rang in my hand, and I automatically unlocked the screen. A new message from Michael. My heart stopped even before I clicked on the image. It was a picture of my home office. Wall. There's a void on it. The painting was gone. All that remained was a nail driven into the center. No lighthouse, no color, just a shadow of what happened. Do you really think that I do not know? Read the text under the photo. Come alone. To the house by the lake. It's time to end this. Dr. Gaddy's voice seemed to echo far away, as if it were coming through a column of water. The results have arrived. The white blood cell count is critically low. Beatty's condition is unstable. Perhaps these are her last hours. The choice became unbearably clear. To go to Lombardy to grab the truth by the throat, capable of destroying the empire of the barons, or to stay with Leah, sister, blood, my reflection, in her, perhaps, last moments. But Leah, as always, made the choice for me. Her next word was almost inaudible, but it conveyed the essence of our common journey. Dr. Gaddy had just prescribed a new treatment aimed at neutralizing the effects of harmful drugs that were slowly eroding Leah's health. But no matter how fragile her body was during these hours, the determination in her eyes, saturated with the bitterness of the past years and the awareness of the approaching denouement, seemed to pour a new force into her body, the one that could break through the wall of silence that has protected the truth for many years. Her voice was low, but it sounded with clear conviction as she pronounced the name, their father, Felice Baron. He didn't die of a heart attack, as the reports claimed, as they repeated in the newspapers. As I told myself, trying to calm my doubts, I was there that day, Leah whispered, and a shadow of memories flashed in her eyes. At the office of the family company, I stayed late. He asked me to check some files important, as he said, especially sensitive. Kate came closer, her face turned deathly pale, her eyes widened with realization I always suspected. She said in a strangled voice, that there was something wrong with his death. Leah nodded, without looking up from the imaginary point on the wall, as if she were there again, 15 years ago, in the silence of the evening office, where the air was saturated with the smell of cigars and leather bindings. He found something, she continued, turning her head towards us, something so important that he decided to hand it over to the investigators. Offshore companies, shell companies, documents linking Rachel and Michael to embezzlement of funds from the family foundation, money laundering, and the withdrawal of assets to non-existent companies covered up by charity projects. He was going to expose them. I felt my stomach twist and fear rise in my throat when Leah pronounced the next name, Rachel. She entered the office in the middle of a conversation. I ducked into the next room, where the archival documents were kept, and through the glass of the door I saw everything. I saw her, without changing her expression, slowly walk over to the coffee table by the window, pour something into a cup, smile softly at Felice when he looked up, surprised by her appearance, and how after a few minutes he began to gasp, clutching his chest. And she played the role to the end. I was filming this, Leah exhaled softly, as if she had just shed the weight she had been oppressed by all this time. I took photos, shot a video where you can see how she calls security, pretending to be a grieving widow. And then it became clear, the very painting, the lighthouse, that Leah gave me as a gift, hid not just a financial dossier, not just compromising evidence on manipulation, but also direct evidence of the murder of Felice Baron, a man who wanted to save his family from his own children. Officer DeSantis, who had been silently taking notes all this time, looked up and took a step closer. Why didn't you go to the police then? Because Rachel saw me, Leah said calmly, like someone who has lived it many times in her mind, not that day, but a week later. She made it clear to me what would happen to my sister if I spoke. And then I met Michael. And everything started spinning. I tried to warn you, Agatha, I tried, but you were so happy, you didn't hear anything. And then they started poisoning me, too, methodically and deliberately, linking my illness to the need for their care. I was kept under control to keep quiet. To keep you blind. Dr. Gaddy, checking the latest test results, stated that the new treatment is showing the first signs of improvement, but slowly, and will require at least a day of continuous monitoring. I leaned over to Leah, barely hearing the phone vibrate in my pocket. Another message from Michael, 1 hour. Come alone. Or the painting will disappear forever. And everything else you care about, too. Leah squeezed my hand with unexpected force, looked into my eyes and said firmly, You have the doctor, you have the police, you have Kate. I'll stay. But you have to put an end to this. Officer DeSantis stepped forward. We can send a team. No, I shook my head, and at that moment an idea was born inside, fully formed, complete, as if it had just been handed to me from the outside. He expects me to come alone. That will be my strength. I went out into the hallway, closed the door behind me, and with trembling fingers took out my phone, scrolled through my old contacts, and stopped at one number that I hadn't dialed in 3 years. It rang twice. Agatha? Is it really you? The voice of Alma, my best friend, in whom I once found a home, sounded with the very note by which it was impossible not to recognize her. Alma, the voice trembled treacherously. Do you remember how you said that something was wrong with Michael and the whole family of the Barons? You were right. I need your help. Are you still working for the FBI's Financial Crimes Division? Yes, she replied without hesitation. Just tell me where you are. Exactly 20 minutes later, I was already behind the wheel of a car heading rapidly towards Lombardy. In the rearview mirror, the silhouettes of unmarked cars flashed by, escorting me at a respectful distance. A team coordinating with the local police was already on the way. My hands, gripping the steering wheel, were calm and firm. While I was rehearsing the plan in my head, thinking over every word, every movement that was supposed to look spontaneous, but at the same time be precisely calibrated, I felt like I was slowly but surely gaining control of the situation, not by what was dictated by external circumstances, but by what was born from within, out of confidence in my own rightness. From the clear knowledge that the truth finally has a chance to be heard, and no matter what happens in this house by the lake, I've already stopped being a victim. What Michael did not know, and this was his most serious mistake, was that while he was focused on Beatty's painting, on these layers of paint and hidden pockets of canvas, he missed something much more important, a treasure hidden not in the strokes, but in the words, which hid a system, a whole network honed by years of criminal activity, which I discovered, not without a shudder, the night before, when I finally dared to open the locked drawer of Rachel's antique desk in her old office in the main house. The box that I kept the key to in my mother's jewelry box, not even realizing how much depended on it. The contents of this box explained literally everything: why Rachel and Michael chose me as their target, why their gaze rested on talented, successful, independent women, as if looking for something dangerous in them that deserved to be eliminated, and, most importantly, where did the money that disappeared from the fund actually go? Projects from private investments seemed to have evaporated. The house by the lake, when it appeared before me, was still the same as I remembered it at the best of times. The majestic silhouette cutting through the crimson gold sky seemed darker than usual, as if the story itself had condensed within its walls, not told, not forgotten, but simply postponed, until my return. Michael's car was parked at the entrance, and next to it was the SUV of Monty, the guard, a former Marine who always looked at me like a fly on the wall until he realized that I was much more dangerous than I looked. Through the wide windows, I saw movement, silhouettes in the hall, shadows crawling across the floor. They were waiting for me. I parked, took a deep breath, and glanced at my phone. A new message from Kate. Leah is stabilizing. We found Dr. Neri. She's already on her way to the hospital with her original medical records. Go after them, little sister. These words warmed me, as if someone gently touched my shoulder, reminding me, you are not alone. I headed for home with an inner calm bordering on numbness, the kind of chill that sometimes comes before a storm. Michael thought he was luring me into a trap, but he forgot who I was before all this, before marriage, before betrayal, before all this vile web. I was Agatha Russo, Beatty's sister, a woman who had been silent for too long, but now she had a voice. I raised my hand to knock, and at the moment when my shadow lay on the wooden porch under the last rays of the setting sun, the door opened by itself. Michael stood on the threshold, his usually meticulous image slightly disheveled, his eyes wild, almost lost, and his clothes smelled of expensive scotch, the same one he drank with Felice on their long, booming evenings, when it still seemed that family was not just a word, but a fortress. "Where is she?" I asked, coming in. "In the living room." "Your sister's amateur dog," he nodded towards the painting leaning against the fireplace, "is right there." Rachel sat in an armchair with her back straight, as if she were chairing a board meeting, and nothing in her appearance betrayed a drop of anxiety, only confidence and fatigue from waiting. Jacob Gaddy, the doctor I trusted until recently, paced from corner to corner, constantly checking his phone, as if hoping for an order that would save him from having to take part in this drama. I allowed myself a small smile. "You always called her an amateur, Michelle," I said, approaching the painting. "You never tried to see what was really there. Aren't you too focused on belittling everything that didn't come from your great family?" "That's enough," Rachel snapped. "We know that Leah hid the documents in the painting. Give us all the copies and we can come to an agreement." I came closer, ran my hand over the canvas, studying the subtleties of the brushstrokes, the contrast of light and shadow. "Do you know what I've always liked about BT? Her attention to detail. She wrote in layers. The truth was not on the surface, but under it. Look, this building is a lighthouse, its reflection in the water. See? It's a little different. It's like there are two versions of the same thing, the one in plain sight and the one underwater. It's almost like your family, isn't it?" Rachel narrowed her eyes, her voice getting colder. "If you think Felice." "He saw it," I interrupted, "and that's why you killed him." Silence fell over the room, heavy and sticky. Jacob froze. Michael took a step back. Rachel narrowed her eyes. "Leah told you," she said almost regretfully, "it was a mistake. She won't live to regret it. Did you really think that we would let her recover after the treatment? We have friends. In many places." My heart sank, but I kept a neutral expression on my face, because she didn't need to say anything. I already knew everything. After all, Felice Barron wasn't just talking to Leah that day, he was compiling a dossier, forming an accusation, building brick by brick the wall of truth that you tried so hard to circumvent, and among other things those who secretly helped him, who supplied him with the necessary figures, built connections between transactions and beneficiaries, who read exorbitant accounting reports as if they were poems, were my father, the man you had thought dead for 12 years. Michael stepped forward, a note of sharp skepticism in his voice. "What are you talking about?" "Your father died in a car accident 12 years ago," he said, as if those words could erase what I knew from the beginning. I silently took out my phone and found the photo I needed, taken the day before Felice's death. It was a surveillance video from a small cafe in Burlington, not too noticeable, but cozy, where, as it turned out, there was more than just an exchange of pleasantries. I lifted the screen, turning it towards them. In the photo, Felice Barron and my father were clearly visible, sitting at a corner table, their heads bent over papers. An open folder lay between them, and on their faces there was concentration, the kind that appears when you're not just discussing a case, but approaching the truth. "My father was a forensic accountant," I said, looking into Michael's eyes. "He's been tracking your family's financial activities for years. He knew how you laundered money through foundations, how you used offshore companies and fake charities. He got too close to the heart of your system, and then you killed him." Something flashed across Rachel's face, not fear, no, she had lived in the shadow of power for too long to allow herself such weakness, but a slight trembling yawn of silence betrayed that she knew it was true. "You're bluffing," she whispered, but her voice betrayed her. I leaned forward a little, my voice became low, calm. almost affectionate, like a teacher explaining a task. Where do you think I learned to keep such detailed records, organize data, look for patterns, hide copies in places where none of your people will ever find them? My father taught me that, before you made him disappear. And I've been planning this moment since the night Michael first approached me at a charity event, from the very minute you thought you'd found the perfect victim. I slowly turned to Michael, looking at him not as a husband, but as an object of research, as a person whom I studied, weighed, deconstructed. Do you really think it was a coincidence? That I'm just a successful businesswoman who happened to be in your field of vision? No, Michael. I knew who you were. I knew what you did to women, how you slowly sucked everything out of them, energy, confidence, finances, how your family drove them to bankruptcy or suicide. You thought I was weak. But I've come to finish what my family started. I went over to the chair Rachel was sitting in, and without taking my eyes off her, I felt on the back of the mechanism that my father had once shown me, the one he had told me about, calling it the heart of their fall. With a small click, a panel on the wall opened slightly, revealing a tiny hiding place cut right into the panel under the wallpaper. Felice didn't keep everything in the office, I said quietly, taking out an old flash drive. He hid the most important files here, in her favorite room, behind her favorite chair, watching her every day, waiting for the moment when she stumbles. When he died, Dad continued the business. When he was killed, I logged into the game. And suddenly, as if on cue, the house lit up with a bright light, screams, sirens were heard outside, silhouettes of people with guns flashed, and a voice through a megaphone, FBI. The house is surrounded. Jacob rushed to the door, but as soon as he opened it, he was immediately grabbed by agents in bulletproof vests, rushing inside. Michael took off and rushed to Beatty's painting, but I was faster. I grabbed it and hit his jaw with all my might, so that he collapsed back, not so much from pain as from surprise. Rachel remained sitting, her eyes blazing with cold fury, hatred boiling in her, but everything had already been decided from the outside. You won't win, she whispered. You have no idea how far our influence extends. I didn't say anything, just pulled out the last photo from my pocket, which I kept until the very end, and put it on her lap. It was Felice, my father, and a young woman with curly dark hair. Kate. Rachel turned pale, her lips moved barely audibly. My daughter? I nodded. She didn't just leave you, she didn't just start her own business. It was all part of the operation. You thought she was weak, that you could ignore her. But she was there from the very beginning. Every step she took was a trap. When the FBI agents entered and snapped the handcuffs, I picked up Beatty's painting, brushing the dust off the glass. By the way, there are no documents here. Beatty's art has always been art. Beautiful. Honest. Present. All the things your family has never understood. Or she couldn't control it. But what happened next proved that even I didn't know all the secrets of the Barron family, because Rachel's last words before she was taken away led to one last revelation, which... When the FBI agents led Rachel to the door, she stopped for a moment, as if attracted by invisible threads to the past, which she had hidden for so many years under layers of power, imaginary secularism and iron discipline, and slowly turned around and met my gaze, full of so many layers of meaning that for a brief moment my breath was taken away. Her immaculately manicured hands, handcuffed, did not lose their grace, even in these cold metal rims. She maintained a regal bearing, grace, like a queen going to execution, knowing that dynasties were in her blood, and that her fall would not overshadow her strength. At that moment, I saw in her eyes not only stubbornness, not only the bitterness of loss and the taste of defeat, but also something strange, elusive, something I hadn't noticed before in her, respect. You know, she said softly, her voice steady but heavy with age, you remind me of a woman. The one I was, before I made my choice. Despite my heart clenching in protest, I asked, what choice is there? And the moment the words left my lips, I realized that part of me didn't want to know the answer. Rachel smiled faintly, a smile of bitterness, unrepentant pain and broken pride. To become a predator instead of prey, she said. And there were no excuses in her voice, just a simple statement, like a diagnosis. 30 years ago, I was a successful interior designer. I had my own company and clients all over Europe. Then I met Nestor, Felice Baron's father. He charmed me, made me feel chosen, and then, as you already know, destroyed my business, isolated me from friends and family, plunged me into a cocoon of addiction, wrapped words, money, fears. He did to me exactly what we later did to others. Michael, who was standing off to the side, shackled, but still not losing his composure, suddenly raised his head sharply, and his voice dropped to a half-whisper, "Mother?" But Rachel didn't even look at him. She continued, "I survived. I was watching. I studied. And when Nestor died, believe me, it wasn't an accident. I realized that if I didn't become who he was, I'd end up in that cage again. Then I decided, if fate has given me a weapon, I will turn it against others. I will become the architect of a system that will destroy, as they destroyed me." Her confession hit me like an avalanche, not only because it changed my whole worldview, but because it made Rachel not just a villain, but once a victim like me. "Felice never knew," she added. "He thought he had married an obedient woman from a good family who would brighten his life. He didn't understand that I was reviving Nestor's scheme, only making it more sophisticated, thinner, safer, and much more profitable." I took a step back. There was something icy about this truth. "Were you the first victim?" I asked softly, barely hearing my own voice. Rachel straightened up even more and said with clear conviction, "I was the last victim. And the first criminal. Every woman we targeted, every business we destroyed, I chose them because they were like me, strong, independent, too lively. I couldn't stand that they were succeeding where I once failed." At that moment, a female agent entered the room, her FBI badge glinting in the lamplight, reflecting in the polished surfaces. "Mrs. Baron, I advise you to keep your confessions for official questioning," she said firmly, but Rachel, as if she hadn't heard, turned to me again. "Check the foundation, not the family one. The actual foundation. Lakehart House, the main house. All objects. Nestor taught Felice how to keep evidence, but I taught him how to keep secrets. We built them into walls, into concrete, into the foundation of the empire itself." Immediately, a young agent entered the room, holding a tablet in his hands. "Ma'am, we are receiving abnormal thermal signals from the basement. It looks like there are hidden rooms." Michael turned pale. "It's impossible. I know every inch of these houses." Rachel shook her head with a grin. "Have you ever wondered why we always used the same construction company for all the renovations? Why were certain areas closed, even when you wanted to change something?" Felice thought he was smart, that his archives were inaccessible, but I had my own collection. It grew under his feet, 30 years of secrets buried in concrete and steel. I felt a cold sweat slide down my back. After all, I worked with these buildings. I personally supervised their redevelopment. I accepted all the restrictions imposed by Rachel, never wondering why these walls should not be touched, why these stairs should not be moved. "What's in these rooms?" I whispered in my mind, already knowing the answer, but not daring to say it. And Rachel answered herself, "That's it. Each scheme. Every victim. Every crime. Not only ours, but also those who came before us. Nestor, his partners, their deals, their puppets. I ensured all this. I told myself that I was doing it for safety. But really?" She looked at Michael, and something remotely resembling regret flashed across her face, like a faint glimmer of the setting sun. "Actually, I think I've been waiting. I was waiting for someone who would be strong enough to end it all. To do what I couldn't." And then, before she was finally led away, she straightened her shoulders and, as if performing the last act of a drama, said, "In my office, in the main house, behind the Monet painting, there is a safe. The combination is the date of Nestor's death. There's a letter inside. I wrote it the day I found out I was pregnant. Michael, read it. And you'll understand why it had to be you, Agatha. As they led Rachel away, I turned to Alma, whose face, usually calm and reasonable, was now stretched with tension. We need to get to this safe before anyone else does, I whispered, and there was not a shadow of doubt in these words, because I knew questioner. There is something hidden in that safe that can not only change the course of the investigation, but also change our entire view of events that until now seemed to be only the result of consistent cruelty, a carefully built pyramid of power, pain, and manipulation. The road to the Baron's main house seemed blurred, as if time had lost its clarity. The air trembled with tension and the weight of silent guesses, and the FBI team, as if anticipating something more than just documents, worked with almost religious concentration, scanning every wall, checking every corner. They found the safe quickly, in the exact spot Rachel had indicated, behind a painting depicting a soft, almost ephemeral Monet landscape, as if it were supposed to hide something completely opposite, not beauty, but ugliness. When the safe opened, the thick smell of old paper and locked time hit the face, and in its depths lay only one object, a yellowed envelope, on which, in a trembling but recognizable hand, was written, "The one who puts an end to it." The envelope trembled in my hands as I carefully opened it, my heart pounding as if it knew that everything I had ever thought about Rachel Barron, the system we lived in, and even myself was about to change. Alma and Kate stood side by side, silent, not even breathing, and in this silence there was not just respect, but a premonition of something great and difficult. The letter began simply, without address, without date, as if it lived outside of time, to the woman who will finally stop me. These words, at first glance, penetrated the soul, because there was no anger or regret in them, only a quiet, courageous acceptance. If you're reading this, you've done what I couldn't. You chose justice over power, healing over revenge. The letter breathed confession. Its lines were woven not just from memories, but from pain and remorse, from an attempt to save at least a trace of humanity in a destroyed soul. I am writing this, she continued, sitting in my newly renovated office, feeling my unborn son moving inside me, wondering what kind of mother I will become, and what kind of monster I already am. The instructions followed. In the secret rooms under each object of the Baron, not only evidence of crimes is hidden, but much more: bank accounts, property deeds, trust funds, fortunes built on the wreckage of lives. Nestor Baron, she wrote, didn't just destroy businesses. He stole them piece by piece, rebuilding his empire from the ruins of the dreams of the women he had broken. She went on to say, I followed his pattern, perfected it, and by doing so, I became worse than the one who destroyed me. But then she discovered another facet. She not only continued the chain of evil, she was looking for a way to break it. Neither Nestor nor Felice would ever have found this. I documented every business, every woman, every crime separately. She kept real records showing how much was stolen and how much was destroyed. I've duplicated every act, every invoice, and every attachment. Everything is legally valid, everything is hidden here, with this letter. A shudder went through my body, not from fear, but from the feeling that I held in my hands not just the key to justice, but also the opportunity to build a new order based not on submission, but on restoration. Inside the envelope was a tiny key to a safe deposit box at the First National Bank. You'll find everything you need there to get back what was stolen. It's not easy to return it, but to restore it, with interest for 30 years. The last paragraph was the gist. I always told myself that I kept these notes as insurance, but the truth was simpler and more painful. I kept them because the part of me that died the day I chose power over justice, she hoped. I was hoping that someone would find these notes. That someone would be stronger than me. And so I read these lines, realizing that it was about me that she was talking, that I was this someone, that it was to me that she entrusted the last thing, not to redeem, but to fix, not to destroy, but to recreate. You're reading this, she finished, because you did something I couldn't. You fought. You didn't let violence turn you into a rapist. You've kept your humanity. Use it wisely. Use her better than I do. Rachel the Baron. 3 months later, I was standing in the spacious, sunny lobby of a newly renovated building that once bore a name that inspired fear, control, and invisible power, and now had a new plaque on its facade, Barron Foundation, Center for Economic Justice for Women, and every word on it sounded like a solemn promise, like an oath given to those who survived and stood up, and who now received not just compensation, but recognition, respect, and the opportunity to channel the power of their wounds into creating a new, just future. Through the shining glass entrance, women began to flock, each with a story that could not be forgotten, each with eyes in which burned not only pain, but also life, reborn on the wreckage of the old system. The hidden rooms found in the basements of the mansions and buildings of the barons revealed not only what Rachel had promised in her letter, bills, documents, trusts that could be used to rebuild what had been destroyed, but also something much more personal, almost intimate, her reflections, doubts, struggles with herself, confessions, in which there was not only guilt, but also hope. Kate, adjusting the sign above the entrance, asked me without holding back her excitement, "Did you ever think that all of this would ever be possible?" I nodded, but my eyes remained glued to the women entering the building. There were familiar faces among them, those who had walked through the darkness without letting it dim their light, and now stood here, not as victims, but as survivors, ready to become part of the change, direct the foundation, direct its programs, make sure that no more women are in the shadows. Leah was standing next to me. Her eyes were clear, her movements confident, and only a faint shadow of fatigue in her face reminded of the struggle she was waging. "She is now in remission," Alma said, approaching me, "the right treatment, on time, and all thanks to access to medical care, paid for of the returned assets." I looked at Leah and felt, somewhere deep inside me, a feeling that was difficult to define, a mixture of gratitude, pride, and pain. I remembered how it all started, the restaurant, the glass of wine, the accusation, the shock, and how everything turned upside down. "Did you think that by marrying Michael, everything would end like this?" asked Kate, and I shook my head, allowing myself a short, sad smile. "No," I admitted, "but I never thought that Rachel would help us fix it all." This was her last, unexpected legacy. In the magazines found in hidden rooms, dozens of pages were devoted not to diagrams, not calculations, but to her personal struggle, an attempt to hold on to the remnants of herself, to remember who she was before she became what she was afraid to become. The last entry, dated the day before our encounter in the restaurant, read simply, "I see myself in Agatha. But I also see who I could be. Perhaps it's not too late for the last choice." Those words pierced me then, and they continue to live in me now. Michelle and Rachel entered into plea deals, providing testimony and documents that helped bring other participants in the scheme to justice, including Jacob Gaddy, who became the state's key witness. The Baron's empire, which seemed eternal and untouchable, collapsed, but in its place something new, something better arose. In my new office, in the space that used to be Rachel's office, there was now a painting by Beatty, the lighthouse, the one she had once painted and kept secret. Now I understood why she had created it, a double image, where the truth above reflected the deeper truth below, just like her own life. Two faces of one soul, confused but not completely lost. My phone vibrated, a message from Kate, another one just came forward. A victim from the time of Nestor. She's ready to tell her story. I looked out the window. Women were gathering below, their silhouettes illuminated by the sun's rays, and it seemed that each of them carried a particle of light torn from the darkness. Rachel's last gift turned out to be more than just a means to restore what was stolen. It became a chance to break a cycle that had lasted for generations, a chain forged from pain, dependence, and silence. I answered the message, got up, and before leaving the office, took one last look at the painting. The lighthouse stood as a symbol of perseverance, its light as a reminder of the path we had traveled. The sun on the canvas rose and set at the same time. It all depended on the angle from which to look at it. The end and the beginning. Like that night, when a glass of wine meant to humiliate me freed me. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives become portals to our true strength. Sometimes, wounds that have healed become sources of strength for others. And sometimes, even in the darkest stories, we find an unexpected glow that can not only point the way home, but also help others find their own. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.